See, I've been reading this book on my iPad. It's called A Modern Utopia by H.G. Wells. It's an interesting book. I mean, he's obviously well ahead of his time. But even so, he's writing from a time, let's see, when is it? Something like 1905. When, for example, he's arguing against racism, but in there some of the places like, and even if it was true, if there was an inferior race, then blah, blah, blah. It's hard to take, and there's some things similarly about not being a sexist that end up sounding a little sexist. I'll go into these later, I guess, if I continue to discuss the book. But really, there was one idea, two ideas, let's say, that I wanted to bring up. Okay, the first one is just a foundational thing where he says that to view a modern utopia, and he refers to a lot of the utopian literature of the past, we have to envision a one-world government where there's a shared culture, you know, with local differences, but a shared language, shared art and literature. And that would have to be the goal. But the isolationist utopias where you just create an enclave of ideal people, that's not going to work. You can't isolate yourself. And that basically you just have to take human nature into account and have a world government. Right. But then the specific idea is this idea that he has about childbirth. Basically, you know, he has a system where there's a lot of social services. If you lose your job for whatever reason, or even don't like it, you know, you can easily get money to travel to another place where there's work, and, you know, they'll give you a house and various things like that. Now, education is free, right? But once you're emancipated, you know, your income isn't free, but you can just go in debt to the state. So the state would give you this money, but you would go in debt to it. Now, it's a debt you never have to repay. But this is the control on child rearing. You can only have a child if you're not dependent on someone else. Excuse me, dependent on someone else, and you're not in debt to the state. Now, the scary thing, and the reason I'm not advocating this, the only thing I'm advocating is that this is worth discussing. I think this is a very touchy situation because I see the logic of that. I think that would make sense. But what do you do if someone does have a kid? And I think Wells was saying that there's some penalties. I think the kids end up taken, and, you know, after the second time, you go to one of his penal colonies. Now, his penal colonies are not hellish prisons. I mean, he imagines one for the people, the hedonists, that just won't be productive. You just put them in the hedonist penal colony. It would probably be fun there. The people there would probably like it. So, those are interesting ideas, but how can you, you know, to take children? I just don't trust the state with that decision. Now, neither does Wells. He's talking about a utopian state, not that our state. And that's one thing he says, is that part of the problem with making these kinds of decisions is that we have a corrupt governments now. We're not in a utopia. But can you imagine this system? Is there an idealized, you know, thought experiment that in which that makes sense? Is there any practical world situation in which that could actually work? And so on. I'm just curious what you're saying. I have used to be very much against all population control. And politically, I am still probably biased against it, but not in such a knee-jerk way. I think perhaps cooperating socially on population is crucial to our future. However, I don't think it necessarily has to be done with laws. I noticed that industrialized nations already have reduced population growth. I think there's a way to give opportunities. And this is one thing that H.G. Wells is saying. He's saying it's not like this is going to have to happen a lot, because basically you're going to give people opportunities. So they won't, you know, be in that kind of situation. I paused for a second because I almost got into some of the woman thing, because Wells actually believes women should be paid for having children, and maybe even bonuses if they do well in school and things like this. If you could prove you're a good child rearing person, you could actually It's not charity. You wouldn't go in debt to the state. You'd actually be paid so that you could devote training a good person. Because all of the citizens in Utopia, of course, require, an education to have a chance to see, what kind of personality they really are and what they really want to accomplish or not. All right.